Good evening, this is Brass Tacks. I'm Zakir Jacob. The controversy over the BBC documentary is now boiling over. The opposition is alleging that the government is scared that the truth is finally coming out. That's what Rahul Gandhi said when he was asked about this in the Bharat Jodo Yatra. The government, on the other hand, says the BBC documentary is not banned, it's only blocked from being broadcast or shown on any platform. The BJP is also saying that this is part of the Western media's bias against Modi, and surely, whether it's the BBC or any other media platform, cannot be more authentic than the Supreme Court of India, which went into the 2002 riots and gave a clean chit to Mr. Modi during his tenure as Chief Minister in 2002 in Gujarat. But first, the story so far.
डॉक्यूमेंट्री जो है कहीं भी लीगली जो है लीगल बतौर लीगल कानूनी रूप से वो बैन नहीं है भारत में, तो उसे देखना कोई गुनाह नहीं है।
बीजेपी नेताओं को बात देखने You can ban, you can suppress the press, you can use CBI, ED, all this stuff. But the truth is the truth. It has a nasty habit of coming out.
ये गंभीर विषय है।
Part 1 of the two-part BBC series was found to be malicious propaganda. It lacked in objectivity. It lacked credibility. It questioned the authority of the Indian justice system. It questioned the credibility of the Supreme Court of India.
All right, we're getting a piece of breaking news right at the top of the show. Things were expected to get heated as the Jawaharlal Nehru University Students' Union was planning to broadcast this particular documentary, the part 1. It was supposed to happen at 9 p.m. tonight, and just moments ahead of that, now the JNSU Students' Union leadership has come out and said that the electricity in and around JNU has been cut. They are alleging, this is the JNSU leadership is alleging, that this has been deliberately done so that this documentary is not telecast there on campus. Nikhil is joining us live from JNU. Nikhil, tell us what's happening there. All right, he's on the phone. Tell us what's happening there right now. Is there electricity on campus? And what is the JNSU leadership telling you?
So, Zaka, we are currently reporting from inside the place where the screening was all set to take place. The place is the JNU SU office at the Deflas. It is the name of that particular site, and we are already running low on the network. This is the reason why we are unable to connect on the video call at the moment. But right now what we can see is that many of the students have gathered here, right where the screen was all set to take place. But there is blackout, Zaka, in entire JNU campus. Now the Students' Union, they are alleging that this is the trick of the administration to avoid the screening of this controversial BBC subject. But on the other side, there are some of the, in fact, if we go by the details, Zaka, today as well, earlier this morning, there was this notice which was out by the administration in the JNU, which clearly said that students should refrain from doing so, and they have not even sought any kind of official permission from the administration. And if they still go ahead with the screening of the BBC subject, then they will be liable for the action. The strict action in terms of the non-disciplinary inside the campus will be taken against all those students or individuals who are part of this particular activity. And going by this version of the ABVP, earlier this morning, Zaka, they said that they are not going to say any of the word in the public domain because there is ban on entire subjects from the government of India only. But later this evening, they are saying that the students who are conducting this entire activity, they are stooges of the British mindset. So this is something which is being alleged by the ABVP. But now, as far as the picture is concerned, we are all present at the place where the screening is all that is place. There is entire campus of Jawaharlal Nehru University. In fact, we have spoken to a number of students from the student union as well. They are
All
saying
right.
that this is the trick, but we are well prepared for the plan B as well.
Okay, well, let's see how this plays out. So there is no lights. It's lights out inside JNU campus right now. Just at 9 o'clock when this documentary was supposed to be screened there, the JNU administration had written to the Students' Union saying that it would be illegal to broadcast this movie. They were still going ahead with their plans, and now the JNSU is alleging that the electricity has been cut off just ahead of this screening. Let me now open this up to our guests who are joining us. Gopal Krishna Agarwal is spokesperson of the BJP. Sanjay Jha, former Congress leader and political analyst. Manisha Priyam, political analyst, also joining us. Adit Kothari is founder of Indic Society, joining us live from London. Veena Sikri, former diplomat and also one of the 300 eminent citizens who wrote a letter last week against this documentary. Let me go across to Gopal Krishna Agarwal first. So there is a view that, what is the big deal about this documentary by actually doing all of this, not banning it, but technically blocking it from being broadcast, what's happening in JNU, so on and so forth. You're actually giving it more publicity, you're giving it more oxygen than it deserves. Had you decided to ignore this, then perhaps nobody would be talking about it. And now this latest thing where the JNUSU, the Students' Union, is alleging that just before they were to broadcast this documentary, lights have been cut off.
Thing is, Zaka, we have to understand that there is a Tukde gang in the country which leaves no opportunity to undermine India's image at the global level. And at every action or any issue where they can find to undermine the current democratically elected our government and to undermine our institutions, they will take all these opportunity to whatever level they can. So the thing is, the documentary of BBC of after 2 decades in itself with an agenda driven is also an issue. But the thing is, there is a section in the country which is completely discredited by their actions on the what we call about is a Tukde gang. Whether it is JNU or the universities, whether it is Kerala government or Telangana, there is a set of people who are trying to promote this narration. And the second thing is, we have to also understand what our constitution asks the government of the day to do. It says that it is the responsibility of the government, and not only the government, every citizen of this country has the responsibility that it should maintain and authority or respect of the institutions like Supreme Court and all courts, High Court, Supreme Court, even the contempt of court law says that the respect of the institution has to be maintained and authority of the institution has to be maintained by everybody.
Sure. Let me ask Sanjay Jha that, the point is that no media organization, BBC or New York Times or whoever it is, no media organization surely is at a better vantage than the Supreme Court of India, and no less than the Supreme Court appointed SIT looked into this matter, and it closed these cases by saying that there was no, large-scale conspiracy or inaction or looking the other way by the leadership of the state at that time. I can quote to you the Supreme Court judgment, which basically says it dismissed claims of a larger conspiracy of the 2002 Gujarat riots, ruling in favor of the closure report filed by the Supreme Court SIT in February 2012. It also rejected allegations of criminal conspiracy at the highest level, observing that the inaction or failure of some officials of one section of the state administration cannot be the basis to infer a pre-planned conspiracy by the Gujarat government. Surely, no media organization is above the Supreme Court of India. And this is like I said, I'm quoting from the judgment of the Supreme Court, Sanjay Jha.
Zaka, very pertinent points. Since the Supreme Court is the one where the BJP seems to be taking a lot of its comfort from, they cannot be hypocritical, right? Then we also need to listen to what the Supreme Court had to say about the Gujarat government, insinuating the role of Mr. Modi when they referred to him and his government as a Nero. And we all know what Nero was famous for, that the city burned while he looked the other way around. I think it's a very serious castigation of, please, I did not interrupt you, Mr. Agarwal, let me finish. It's a very serious castigation, and frankly, for those who have seen the BBC documentary, that's exactly what the BBC documentary says. Point number 2, the BJP can't have the cake and eat it too. I heard Mr. Gopal Agarwal saying this is 20 years old. For God's sake, your party every day rakes up history of centuries ago. You talk about the freedom movement, you malign Nehruji, etc. That is okay. But 20 years ago, perhaps one of the worst communal riots, which many people called as a state-sponsored genocide, you can't walk away from it simply because 20 years have gone. Third point, Zaka, this is a British Foreign Office investigation. This is a formal British government investigation. This is not about BBC. Let's understand, let's make a distinction very clear. BBC is a medium. I know the right-wing trollers are going hammer and tongs after BBC, but this is the British government. So Rishi Sunak may have...
One sec. I just want to be clear on the facts. I just want to be clear on the facts. This is a set of communications, a report that was sent by the British High Commission here in India at the time 2002. I think Jack Straw was the Foreign Secretary of Britain. You've seen what Kanwal Sibal, who was India's Foreign Secretary, who had said that there was one particular diplomat who was going out of his way to do this and then sort of circulate this amongst the EU envoys at that time, to which a démarche was also issued to the British High Commission and to this particular diplomat. There was this report. It was a classified report. It was kept there for 20 years. The BBC had access to this report and they broadcast parts of it. But that's not the only part of this documentary. And that report certainly is not, the gospel truth as far as 2002 is concerned. So I'm coming back to that question that I asked you. Are you then saying that the Supreme Court erred in its judgment? Because surely, the court went into every detail of what happened in 2002. And I just read a portion of what the court had to say about this quote-unquote organized criminal conspiracy behind the riots.
Well, two short points. Before I come to the Supreme Court, let me just tell you this. The US government refused to give a visa to Mr. Modi on human rights violations. And I think we all know why. There was no particular reason for them to target him. I think it was pretty brazen what was going on. Even Mr. Vajpayee in a press conference had to chide Mr. Modi. And anybody who knows the BJP's entire political history will tell you that Mr. Vajpayee was never the same after the BJP ensured that Mr. Modi continued as a chief minister. But the larger point that you raised, the Supreme Court, on the Supreme Court's verdict is based on the whole conspiracy angle. But that is one angle where the Supreme Court has to be honored, whatever they said. Mm-hmm. But please remember, there are multiple aspects to what happened in Gujarat. And that conspiracy alone is not the only aspect. Okay. Secondly, Raju Ramachandran, who happened to be an amicus curiae of the Supreme Court, said, I don't agree with the SIT. He believed there was a prosecutable evidence that needed to be investigated further.
No, again, if you're going to pick holes in every judgment and every conclusion, and this is by, again, a Supreme Court appointed SIT, but be that as may, let me ask Veena Sikri. I'm sure you must have read your former colleague in the MEA, Mr. Kaju, writing in one of the papers today saying that, the manner of takedowns should not be a routine response to controversial documents or documentary, even if the content therein is offensive. He says you should have expected that in the year of India's G20 presidency, there would be greater scrutiny, there would be these sort of quote-unquote hatchet jobs, and the way to respond to this is by displaying self-assurance and sober responses and not by getting agitated by every critical documentary or statement. I want to know from you, ma'am, as one of the signatories to the letter that you released last week, what were you so agitated about this documentary, and is that a better response as opposed to what Mr. Kaju said and I just outlined a moment ago?
I think one has to go into very carefully the reason why the documentary has been made and broadcast at this time. And one has to take on board the complete bias and malafide of the people who have made the documentary. I think that is the most important point, because they are trying to stir up something in India. They're trying to create communal disharmony in India. And I think it is the responsibility of the government to take whatever action they feel is necessary to ensure that such communal harmony doesn't get fanned unnecessarily. Let's take, for example, two facts from the so-called documentary that I would like to raise. First of all, the bias and the malafide comes out because they just have not mentioned the Supreme Court judgment in their documentary. This is absolutely amazing that the Supreme Court, under the UPA government, has gone into it, has appointed a SIT, has monitored the work, and has given a very detailed judgment. And the documentary finds it unfit even to mention that this judgment has come.
Yeah.
Secondly, they talk about the British diplomats' report. The British diplomats' report has nothing new that did not appear in the media repeatedly at that time, and which was taken fully on board by the Supreme Court and the SIT during their work. So again, this whole business of saying that a British diplomat, has done this means that, we have to take it on board. So I think this whole question of taking on board, what is the motivation? Why has it been brought out at this time?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it? Who are the people behind it? We do know, for example, that even in the UK, a member of Parliament, of the British Parliament, a person of Indian origin, has actually written to the Director General of the BBC, raising these very same questions and saying that this documentary is going to harm relations between Hindus and Muslims in the UK as well.
Yeah.
Apart from the fact of it trying to harm India-UK relations. So there are very broad ramifications of this when you look into the reason, the maliciousness. And, we have people like the former Foreign Secretary of the UK, Jack Straw, the person who had been completely shown to, support false documents because of the WMD, Weapons of Mass Destruction report in Iraq. Now, he not only spoke repeatedly about the British diplomat's report, but then he also said when he came on a Indian platform, Godhra train burning, that's just an accident. How can a senior person like that talk about something that has been established by the Indian courts, that has been already punished? The people have been, given their sentences, and they have completed their sentences, some of them. And then you have this former foreign secretary talking about that.
Okay.
It just shows a complete lack of sensibility.
Let me go to Manisha Priyam and then Adit Kothari after that. Manisha Priyam, politically speaking, the issue is, the opposition says that, why not show the documentary? You're actually making a mountain out of a molehill. Today, Rahul Gandhi said the truth has a nasty way of coming out. But the fact is that, A, the Modi supporter or the BJP voter is not going to be, is not going to not vote for the BJP in the upcoming elections just because of this documentary. Let's be very clear about that. The support for Mr. Modi and for the BJP is, in spite of what happened in Gujarat 2002. So when the opposition goes after Mr. Modi on this issue, a 20-year-old issue which has been settled by the Supreme Court of India, isn't it also politically backfiring because it activates Mr. Modi's base? The base voter is enthused by this because it plays into the base. And yet at the same time, there's nothing new in this documentary. It's not like any new facts have been brought forth which sheds any new light. So the question that's being asked is the opposition missing a trick, even politically speaking? Forget about what happened there, the legal ramifications, but even politically speaking, is it giving a chance to Mr. Modi's base, the BJP's base, to be riled up about something in a way that we haven't seen for some time now?
So I think I want to phrase this whole thing, frame it slightly differently. I think it's not about the opposition right now. It's about the BBC releasing a documentary, so to say, based on a report of the Foreign Office. And it's come just 2 decades later. So any ordinary questioning mind in India will ask what Vivek Kajju has asked or what Veena Sikri is saying, that why did they take 2 decades and what's about the timing of this documentary? Remember, BBC documentaries are not the most watched things in India anyways, really. There are many other things happening as far as the media space is concerned. People will go watch maybe an RRR or Nacho 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 rather than a BBC documentary.
Okay.
So I think the real news has been made by trying to put it down, or maybe, just as you watch a historical narrative, history is never a settled fact, as you say. History has disputes, history has contestations, and the Indian psyche and the Indian political voter is mature enough, be it the poor voter, is mature enough to understand as to what they want to do with history when they are going to vote on an issue of a current affair, right? So don't think that the political voter will be riled or anything. Those who vote for the BJP are certainly mature enough to understand why they vote for it. And certainly this documentary or any other documentary is not the reason why they do vote or do not vote.
Yeah.
There's only one thing that I disagree with my esteemed co-panelists about, and that is about continuously calling the JNU Tukde Tukde gang. Remember when it was called the Tukde Tukde gang way back in 2014? From then until now, there have been several batches of admissions based on all India entrance exams. So certainly there are newer generations of students who come. There are teachers who retire. To call everybody a Tukde Tukde gang or anything, it is one of India's premier universities, and G20 is also the time when we need to stop talking about our own institutions with a sense of political mockery.
Okay.
They have a new vice chancellor, and my conversations with most colleagues tells me that things are very settled on the campus.
Okay.
Somebody is trying to rile it up, no need to get worried about it.
All right,
That's how I look
I'll
at
give
it.
Gopal Krishna
India
Agarwal a
is
chance to
strong
respond
enough
to
not
that.
to get riled. Just 1 second.
Yeah.
India is strong enough to not get riled by somebody's documentary or any of these things.
Okay.
I think there are more foundational issues at work here.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Gopal Krishna Agarwal respond, and then I'll go to Adit Kothari, who's been patiently waiting.
I
Yeah.
want to
Adit, I'm coming
underline
to you.
I want to underline 2-3 important things. There can be a question and debate about what is the response whether of the government to this documentary or other thing. But what I tell you is that our government does not take, we have a different way of responding. We do not take anything lying down which is undermining the national interest, which undermines the image of the India in the global country. This is an important year of G20 presidency. Anything which undermines the image of India globally with a timing and intent. We have a serious objection to BBC documentary because of its timing and intent, and therefore anything undermining that our authority or national interest or image, we will not take it lying down. You can question that why you responded to that way,
Okay.
that is all right. But our response is very strong that we will not allow anything to undermine the image and
Zaka,
authority.
I need to come.
No, one second, ma'am. One second. I need to go to Adit Kothari also. 1 second, please. Let him finish.
Give me 30 more seconds.
Yeah.
The thing is that we are running through a constitution which has a very important concept of res judicata. That means that any debate has to rest with the decision of the Supreme Court. Supreme Court is the highest authority. Once it has given a decision, the whole country has to accept this. That is the principle of res judicata.
Okay.
That principle
so
is
let me ask Adit Kothari.
And if we
had I think 2 British members of Parliament now writing to the Director General of the BBC. One came out today, Mr. Popat, saying that this is a brazen attempt to not just cause communal tensions in India, but also cause communal tensions in the UK. He's also asked the BBC DG to try and stop playing the second part of the documentary. I believe it comes out later on tonight. But the question that's being asked, and I think what the government has been trying to stress on, is that whether it's the BBC or Time magazine, which back in 2016-17 had called, in fact, put a cover on Mr. Modi and called him India's divider-in-chief. The New York Times had run a front-page story saying that the real death toll of India in COVID was actually 42 lakh and not 4 lakh. There was a French media outlet, Mediapart, which did a series of investigative reports on the Rafale deal, and finally the Supreme Court dismissed it. So what the government has been saying is Western media has this bias against Mr. Modi and against his government, perhaps in part because of what happened in Gujarat in 2002, or that they simply can't come to terms with the fact that here is a popularly elected government, not once but twice.
I think, Zaka, it's more the latter than the former. I think Narendra Modi essentially defies the colonial collegiate system that has existed in India for such a long time. I mean, here comes a prime minister right from the grassroots level, and he completely dismantles all of the colonial hangover systems that have existed in India for such a long time. And I think that's what makes, the foreign media outlets, the left-leaning academia extremely uncomfortable with it. And also with the new crop of authors that are coming into India, the likes of J. Sai Deepak, Vikram Sampath, and all of these kind of guys who are dismantling all of the kind of history, the rabid history that has been perpetrated in India by the likes of Irfan Habib, Romila Thapar. So it's essentially making them extremely uncomfortable at this time. I mean, 2002 was not the only riot in India, the way BBC is essentially painting it out to be. 1984 was much bigger. At that point, the sitting prime minister essentially said that, when a large tree falls, the earth rumbles. There was absolutely no consequence. This is the first time a sitting chief minister was essentially put into, enormous amount of grilling, 6 to 8 hours of SIT grilling, followed by narco tests, Supreme Court, everything was thrown at him, but yet he comes out on top, and that is essentially making them feel extremely uncomfortable. What my disagreements are, with Madam Sikri is the fact that, we shouldn't be trying to ensure that this documentary is not broadcasted in India. In fact, if anything, I think we should broadcast it as much as we can, because there are so many factual errors with this particular documentary that can be easily dismantled. I mean, the fact that the Gujarat chief minister at that point had written to his Congress neighboring states for police assistance, and Digvijay Singh had essentially said that we cannot provide you police assistance because we fear of a spillover into our state. And these are documents which can be backed up with proof. So all we should be trying to do is dismantling this ludicrous hypothesis that that the BBC has essentially played out, and all they're trying to do is try and find different permutation combinations to try and stitch it up to get to the result of that hypothesis, and that is where the problem essentially lies.
So Sanjay Jha, respond to that. When there is all of this negative opinion pieces and editorials in Western media, as the government says, is it lack of acceptance that here is a popularly elected leader? You can criticize him, you can criticize his government's policies, but I'm just giving you a sample. In 2018, BBC ran a story titled Narendra Modi, Would India's New Prime Minister Be Good for the Economy? It highlighted negative aspects of his economic policies, even though India at that time and continues to be the fastest growing economy in the world. The Guardian in 2016 publishing an article titled Narendra Modi's government accused of role in religious violence, even though, again, NCRB data shows that communal incidents have come down over the last 8 years. The New York Times in March 2017 publishing an op-ed titled The Dark Side of India under Narendra Modi. Now, the point is that there seems to be, or at least the government believes there seems to be a pattern of a narrative to try and undermine Mr. Modi and his regime, which does not take into account the two historic mandates that the people of India have given him.
Zaka, to some of those very articulate cheerleaders for Mr. Modi in this debate, I think they should first read their own Supreme Court. Since everybody's been talking about India's institutions have their own credibility, they should read what the Supreme Court has said on hate speech of this government. They should read what the Supreme Court said on the Nupur Sharma case. They should read what the Supreme Court has said on the Delhi riots case. I mean, this is the Supreme Court of India, no less. You have Mr. Agarwal here giving us a lecture on Supreme Court when your government is basically threatening the Supreme Court on the basic structure of the Constitution. I think you are finding here some preposterous, absurd and atrocious comments. Today the BBC's program, by the way, juxtaposed to what the Supreme Court has said, actually makes a logical, coherent piece, because that's exactly what the Supreme Court of India has been telling this government. You cannot deny, nobody can deny this, that the religious persecution, the harassment of minorities, the cases of lynching, the open threats to them about, their profession, Goli Maro, we know all the stuff that has been talked about. We know what Pragya Singh Thakur said the other day about weaponizing hate. I mean, we are talking about a serious problem. The BBC documentary, I believe, is just the tip of the iceberg. And I will tell you, because I was fortunate enough to see it, I will tell you this for a fact. The government is stuck because, they're as they say, they can't have an escape route. If people see that program and they listen to some of the confessions made by people who are eyewitnesses, it'll scare you. It'll make you sad. It'll make you, kind of remorseful that is this a country that we once dreamt.
Gopal Krishna Agarwal, final word, and then I'll wrap up after that. Yeah.
Zaka, important thing is, if you want to talk about the historical issues and challenges before India, these challenges which Mr. Sanjay Jha is talking are not caused by our making. It is the historical aspect, and there are several factors which have caused these challenges for the country where there are divisive forces. We have to see what divisive forces or what narrations are helping these divisive forces. The thing is, there is a group of people who do not accept the democratic institutions of the country, who thinks themselves to be above the democratic institution, whether election commission or Supreme Court or other thing, they think themselves are to the above those things, and they give their own narration. You cannot allow them. First, we have to understand this, after 2 decades, is this BBC documentary not with a bad intent? Is it with a good intent? Or will this narration not help into the divisive forces or not?
All right. Okay. I've got to leave it at that. I want to thank all our guests because I'm completely out of time. I want to thank all our guests. I'm completely out of time. All I'd say as we close is, this is the G20 year, and there are going to be these kind of attacks, these kind of blindsides, if you will. But the response to all of it, as Vivek Karju explained in one of his editorials today, can't be just to beat the showcase down or beat the documentary down. The response to every documentary or every statement can't be that we're going to shut it down, because that's not what big powers do. Big powers have the ability to take a knock or two because you are a big power. As the old American saying goes, you carry a big stick, but keep your mouth shut. So let's see how this plays out in the G20 year. But let me now go across to the other story, and that, of course, is of great consequence, both politically as well as for the armed forces. Mr. Digvijay Singh, senior Congress leader, yesterday once again questioning the rationale and asking for evidence of the surgical strikes. Today, his leader Rahul Gandhi in the Bharat Jodo Yatra press conference was asked about it, where he distanced himself and the party from what Digvijay Singh said, saying that it's a ridiculous comment and that the armed forces are doing a splendid job. They do not need to be asked to show proof of what they're doing. But at the same time, the BJP is saying 2 things. One, why not take action and demonstrate and set an example that this is what will happen to people who question the armed forces? And number 2, they're also saying that this is reeking of a mindset, an anti-India narrative, an anti-armed forces narrative, as it were, which the Congress and the opposition are accused of from time to time. So let me now go across to someone who was, in a sense, the architect of the surgical strikes of 2016. The former Army Commander of the Northern Command, Lieutenant General D.S. Huda, is joining me. Thank you very much, General Huda. Pleasure as always speaking with you. First things first, there are these political comments, the latest one from Digvijay Singh. It keeps coming from time to time, questioning, the strike, asking for evidence, so on and so forth. Like I said, Rahul Gandhi has categorically distanced himself and the party from what Digvijay Singh has said. But I'm asking you as a Fauji, someone who's led an entire command and someone who was the architect of the 2016 surgical strikes, what do such comments do? Does it send out a negative signal, both within the ranks and more importantly, perhaps to our adversaries, that there are these discordant notes that are coming in from the political establishment in India? There is no national consensus or national unity, if you will, on something as important as national security. So is this damaging? What is the fallout of such comments?
So, Zaka, as far as, the whole sort of larger national security issue is concerned, I think you sort of hit the nail on the head that, we need to have a consensus amongst all political parties. We are dealing with Pakistan, which has been a sort of hostile neighbor for decades.
Yeah.
And China is emerging as a new threat.
Correct.
As a new military threat to India. And so we are in a challenging position where we need national consensus on these issues. And unfortunately, the statements that come out like this, sets a discordant note. As far as the military is concerned, as far as the army is concerned, Zaka, let me tell you, it's based on a very strong sort of foundation of organizational ethic, which is honor, loyalty, courage, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And so the morale is not so easily weakened by these statements. But it saddens you. You have these soldiers, and I'm talking specifically about the 2016 strikes. You have these soldiers who actually put their lives on line and gone across. Fortunately, we had no casualties.
Correct.
But it could well have happened. And after they've carried out such a successful sort of operation, which has been lauded, by everyone, then to start questioning it, I think is absolutely incorrect.
You had an opportunity, General Huda, I think it was in 2019 before the Lok Sabha elections, to devise a national security strategy document for the Congress party. And in your interactions with politicians, irrespective of what their affiliations may be, do you get a sense that they understand the seriousness or the gravity of these issues, whether it's a cross-LOC strike, whether it's dealing with an adversary like China, or do you believe that for politicians this is kosher, any issue is kosher, that it can be used to score political points?
I think there is an understanding. So let's not also, think that our political leadership and politicians don't understand that there are issues and challenges facing India. I think what unfortunately happens is, sometimes politics overtakes this. So the statements by Mr. Digvijay Singh are hugely political in nature. Mm-hmm. And my own sense is, look, you can question the government and that's the job of the opposition. But please, for God's sake, leave the army and the military out of your political debates.
Yeah.
Because this, at the end of the day, is only going to damage, the country. There are chances of, politicization. There are chances of the military starting to lean one side or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And these are very damaging. So please question the government. Please do whatever you have to do.
Okay.
But leave the army out of your political debates.
All right, and I get one final question. Again, the dichotomy of this, while all of these questions and asking for evidence and where is the proof, is all sort of seemingly restricted to one adversary, the Western neighbor. Some of these questions are not being asked about the other adversary, which is our northern neighbor. And we've had this ongoing standoff for the last 2+ years now. Do we really know fully the enormity of the China challenge and what's happening right now at our borders?
I'm sure we do. So, Zaka, my own sense is, before 2020 and what happened at the LAC in Eastern Ladakh, there was, I think, a sense that, China's military challenge will not manifest in the way it has manifested. And that China, although a long-term sort of strategic rival, India will be able to handle China diplomatically, politically, with our sort of economic linkages.
Sure.
I think after 2020, there is great clarity that, look, China poses a military challenge and has to be tackled properly. And I think steps have been taken in that direction.
Mm-hmm.
The government has very clearly sort of communicated that, look, it cannot be business as usual if the LAC remains disturbed.
Yeah.
Now, can you deal with China in a similar way as you deal with Pakistan? Obviously not, because they are completely two different adversaries, and we have to look at those challenges sort of differently and how to deal with them.
All right. Okay. General D.S. Huda, as always, a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you very much for joining us here on Brass Tacks. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, Pakistan is completely in the dark. Massive power shortages in some of the biggest cities in that country. 15 hours in Karachi, 12 hours in Lahore. This is perhaps the most desperate time for the incumbent government of Shahbaz Sharif. We'll have details right on the other side.